What are helminths? Helminths are worm-like parasites, of which there are many different varieties. Helminths can survive on their own, as well as by living as parasites on other animals. The most common are soil-transmitted helminths, schistosomes, and filarial worms. The World Health Organization has a metric called a DALY, which means a disability-adjusted life year. This measures all the lost years of healthy lives in the world. There are 13 to 14 million DALYs caused by helminths yearly. So there are 2 billion people with helminth infections worldwide. Helminths are most common in warm, humid, rural areas with poor sanitation. However, they can also be found in areas with temperate climates during warmer parts of the year. 90% of people infected with schistosomiasis from schistosomes live in sub-Saharan Africa. It is the second most prevalent tropical disease behind malaria. There are 3 different categories of helminths. There are flukes, which are also known as trematodes. These are leaf-shaped hermaphroditic flatworms, except for schistosomes, which are bisexual instead. Their life cycle usually involves a snail intermediate host. Tapeworms, aka cestodes, are elongated hermaphroditic flatworms that live in the intestinal lumen. The larval forms live in extraintestinal tissues instead. Roundworms, the third, are bisexual cylindrical worms, which inhabit intestinal and extraintestinal sites. Roundworms include soil-transmitted helminths, which are the most common type of helminth. Soil-transmitted helminths. Soil-transmitted helminths are roundworms that grow and live in soil, and then go to live in the human intestines. There are approximately 1.5 billion people infected with soil-transmitted helminths worldwide. There are 3 different types. There is Acerus lumbicoides, otherwise known as Acerus, whipworm, and hookworm. Acerus is the most common, while hookworm is the least common. 819 million people worldwide have Acerus. There are 464 million with whipworm, and 438 million with hookworm, which is the least common but still the most deadly. Of the 5.2 million DALYs caused by soil-transmitted helminths, 62% are caused by hookworm. A human might get infected by Acerus or whipworm helminths by consuming soil containing the infective eggs. Symptoms. Light soil-transmitted helminth infections are often caught without symptoms. If the infection is more severe, symptoms may include abdominal pain, diarrhea, blood loss, rectal prolapse, as well as physical and cognitive growth retardation. Hookworm. Once common in the southeastern United States, hookworm infections are now greatly lessened in the area because of increases in sanitation quality and quality of life. Hookworms live in the small intestines, and the eggs can be passed in the feces during defecation. This means that if defecation occurs outside, the eggs can live in soil and hatch into larvae, which can then pass through human skin. Unlike the other soil-transmitted helminths, consuming hookworm eggs will not give you hookworm. Many people who come down with hookworm do not show symptoms, other than having some slight gastrointestinal symptoms, but serious problems can arise. These include blood and protein loss, which could then cause anemia. Schistosomes, otherwise known as blood flukes. Schistosomes, which live in water, has over 200 million people infected, which is mostly with people who live in impoverished communities with poor sanitation. 10% of those infected suffer severe chronic health consequences, and it caused 3.3 million DALYs. Schistosomes cause schistosomiasis when they inhabit water in their infective stage, known as cercaria. If a human swims in the water, the cercaria can penetrate their skin. In the body, cercaria mature into a different larval form, known as schistosomula. The schistosomula will travel through the blood and lymphatic system to the liver and lungs, where it will reach maturity. The adult worm will then relocate wherever it pleases, which depends on the species of the schistosome. The bladder, rectum, and intestines are likely candidates. However, illness in humans will be caused by the number and location of the schistosomula eggs, and not the adult worms. The eggs can even be deposited at the brain, spinal cord, pelvis, and vulvovaginal areas. Symptoms of schistosomiasis. Symptoms may involve fever, enlargement of organs involving the lymph nodes, liver, and spleen. Bloody, painful urine and diarrhea may also occur. Chronic infection can cause complications such as liver fibrosis, bladder cancer, infertility, and colorectal malignancy. Lymphatic filariasis, aka LF. LF is caused by 3 different species of filarial worms, but 90% of the cases are caused by Wucheria bancrofti. The adult worms will live in the lymphatic vessels and disrupt the lymphatic system. They can live in there for 6 to 8 years and produce millions of microfilariae, which means immature larvae. These microfilariae will circulate in the human's bloodstream. Mosquitoes can even become infected with the microfilariae when they bite an infected person. These immature larvae will develop into larvae inside of the mosquito, and they can re-enter a human body through the skin when the mosquito goes for another drink. Thus, the cycle of infection can continue. LF has approximately 120 million cases, and it causes 2.8 million dailies yearly. Symptoms of LF. LF used to be known as elephantiasis because 1/3 of cases disfigure or incapacitate the patient. Most infections, however, are asymptomatic, yet they can still cause damage to the kidneys and the lymphatic system. If the disease is chronic, it will lead to tissue swelling, skin and tissue limb thickening, and scrotal swelling. Often, acute episodes of local inflammation of the skin, lymph nodes, or lymphatic vessels will occur. These episodes might be caused by the body's immune response to the parasite, but mostly they're caused by secondary bacterial skin infections because the normal defenses are weakened due to lymphatic damage. These attacks can be debilitating and lead to life-devastating social stigma. The stigma often leaves the infected unemployed, impoverished, and in poor mental health. Treatment for helminths. Helminths are usually treated with broad-spectrum benzimidazoles, which includes albendazole and mebendazole. These come in pill form. The medicines work to kill helminths by keeping the parasite from absorbing glucose, so it will have no energy and die. The spread of LF can be stopped by preventative chemotherapy with anti-helminthic drugs. The World Health Organization uses Mass Drug Administration, or MDA. This involves administering doses annually to all of the population which is at risk. They can also administer it to specific groups in the population who might be at risk, or simply just people who are infected with the helminths. The drugs do not really hurt adult filarial worms, which cause LF, but it can reduce the number of microfilariae, so mosquitoes will not spread the disease. The treatment involves varying combinations of albendazole, ivermectin, and dithylcarbamazine citrate. The immune response to helminths. Even though there is a wide variety of helminths, the response is usually very similar, which is known as a T helper 2 type response. This includes both the innate and the adaptive system, separate from just the T helper 2 response. It begins when dendritic cells present a parasite antigen to a CD4 plus T cell in the lymph nodes. Th2 effector cells will come and secrete IgE, interleukin 4, 5, 9, 10, and 13. These are different types of cytokines, which reduce inflammation. IL-4 and IL-13 can facilitate the expulsion of a helminth by causing changes in the physiology of the intestines. There will be intestinal mast cells, eosinophils, which are white blood cells, and goblet cells, which secrete mucus responses. There will also be the proliferation of intestinal cells and intestine contractions. The number of regulatory T cells produced will increase. This response might also include you walling off the eggs or larvae with a granuloma formation and tissue repair. The immune response to helminths is effective in minimizing the number of helminths that live in the intestinal tract and repairing tissue damage caused by helminths. Strong immune response. On the second infection, but not the first, an immune cell infiltrate will appear and damage the larval parasite at the site of parasite residence. This infiltrate will include T helper 2 cells, dendritic cells, and macrophages. This will lead to the expulsion of the worm within 14 days. Vaccines for helminths. There are no vaccines currently out for helminths. There are 4 main difficulties involved in producing this vaccine. One is, it is possible that ineffective immune mechanisms may be invoked by a vaccine, and thus disease development including an immune response could occur. 2. Vaccines can interact with IgE wrong. One vaccine caused a small group to experience allergic reactions because the vaccine interacted with IgE antibodies induced by a previous infection by hookworm. 3. Testing for vaccine potency is difficult because helminth pathogens don't reliably induce mortality in animal models, and the vaccines don't induce sterilizing protection either. And 4. During chronic helminth infection, there is deficient acquired immunity, which means that sufficient vaccine immunogenicity could not be attained. However, as shown before, humans can level the immune system against helminths by taking the chemotherapy, which will help produce the immune cell infiltrate. Treatment with helminths. Helminths have an ability to control excessive inflammatory responses, as shown by the immune system response. This has been theorized by scientists to have a beneficial effect on inflammatory bowel conditions, multiple sclerosis, asthma, and atopy. Tests so far have included either pig whipworm or hookworm, which is a more controversial treatment. Pig whipworm will last for weeks until the body removes it, which is beneficial for the patient because it is not chronic and will not cause public health issues. Hookworm is administered with the larvae through the skin, where they will move through the vasculature and lungs to the small intestine, where they survive by feeding on blood. Hookworm might give rise to infections lasting years, and at higher doses might cause intestinal symptoms and anemia. Although results have been positive in animals, helminth therapy has not generated enough human-positive data to be confirmed as of yet. Helminth infections can work to reduce allergic reactivity in mice and rats, though it can only prevent the development of allergic reactivity, and not necessarily cure established allergies. Different studies show different results in regard to whether helminth infections decrease allergic disease. Possibly, it is necessary that we need to be exposed to them at a young age to allow our immune system to develop with the helminth. Overview. Overall, helminths are a widespread yet mostly ignored problem in the scientific community. This can be most likely attributed to the fact that helminth infection mostly infect impoverished communities in tropical areas. In fact, it seems like the most attention helminths get is in studies about treating diseases that are more common in developed countries. As we've seen throughout the video, the mortality rate of most helminths is fairly low, but considering that more than 1/4 of the world is infected, it still leads to devastating numbers. Thank you for listening.